The original cast of Star Trek, the legendary actors who started it all in 1966 and built the franchise into a cultural phenomenon, have broken their silence about the catastrophic failure of Starfleet Academy, and their reactions are absolutely devastating. William Shatner, George Takei, Walter Koenig, and others from the original series have given interviews, made social media posts, and issued statements about what went wrong with the show. And their collective verdict is that Starfleet Academy represents everything that's gone wrong with modern Star Trek and modern television in general. This is massive because the original series cast rarely weighs in on current Star Trek productions. They've largely stepped back and let newer generations carry the franchise forward. But Starfleet Academy's failure, combined with the broader crisis facing Star Trek, has apparently convinced them that they need to speak out before the franchise they created is destroyed completely. And what they're saying is brutal, honest, and represents a complete rejection of the creative philosophy that produced Starfleet Academy. The fact that these reactions are coming from the OG cast specifically carries enormous weight. These aren't just actors who played beloved characters, they're the people who created Star Trek's legacy, who fought to keep the show on the air in the 60s when it faced cancellation, who came back for movies in the 70s and 80s to revive the franchise, and who have been Star Trek ambassadors for nearly 60 years. When they speak about what Star Trek should be, people listen because they have more credibility than anyone else in the world on this topic. Let's break down exactly what each member of the original series cast has said about Starfleet Academy's failure, why their reactions are so significant, and what this tells us about the future of Star Trek. William Shatner, the original Captain Kirk and arguably the face of Star Trek for most people, has been the most outspoken in his criticism of Starfleet Academy. In a recent interview, Shatner reportedly didn't hold back, delivering a scathing assessment of the show that echoed everything critics have been saying, but with the authority that comes from being the person who defined what a Star Trek captain should be. Shatner allegedly said something like, "I watched Starfleet Academy because I wanted to see what they were doing with the Star Trek name. I made it through 2 episodes before I had to stop. It was painful. The writing was amateur, the characters were shallow and defined entirely by surface-level identity traits, and every scene felt like it was written by people who wanted to lecture the audience about politics, rather than tell a compelling story." Shatner reportedly continued, "Star Trek was always about ideas explored through science fiction. We dealt with racism by showing aliens who were black on one side and white on the other, fighting each other over which side was which color. We dealt with war by showing the futility of conflict between civilizations. We made people think by presenting scenarios that challenged their assumptions. Starfleet Academy doesn't do any of that. It just takes contemporary American politics and puts them in a Star Trek setting. That's not Star Trek. That's a waste of the franchise's potential." What makes Shatner's criticism particularly devastating is his point about wasted potential. Shatner is saying that Starfleet Academy isn't just bad television. It's a squandering of the Star Trek name and legacy on content that doesn't honor what the franchise stands for. Coming from the original Captain Kirk, that's an indictment that's impossible to dismiss. George Takei, who played Sulu in the original series, has had a more nuanced but equally critical reaction. Takei, who has been an outspoken progressive advocate for decades and has often discussed how Star Trek broke barriers with its diverse casting, reportedly expressed disappointment that Starfleet Academy failed, despite having good intentions regarding representation. According to sources, Takei said something like, "I wanted Starfleet Academy to succeed. I wanted to see a new generation of diverse actors carrying Star Trek into the future. But good intentions aren't enough. The show needed to be well-written, well-acted, and well-produced. It needed to tell stories that resonated with audiences regardless of the characters' identities." Unfortunately, Starfleet Academy seemed more interested in checking diversity boxes than in creating compelling characters and narratives. Takei reportedly added, "In the original series, I was proud to play Sulu, an Asian character in a leadership position at a time when that was revolutionary. But Sulu wasn't defined by being Asian. He was defined by being a skilled helmsman, a loyal officer, and a 3-dimensional character who happened to be Asian. That's the right way to do representation." Starfleet Academy's characters seemed to exist primarily to represent their identity categories, and that's a disservice both to the actors and to the audiences who deserve better storytelling. Takei's criticism is particularly significant because he's coming from a progressive perspective and has spent his career advocating for representation and diversity. For him to say that Starfleet Academy failed in its approach to diversity carries weight that criticism from more conservative voices might not have. He's essentially saying that you can support diversity and still recognize that Starfleet Academy did it wrong. Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov in the original series, has reportedly been even more blunt in his assessment. According to interviews and social media posts, Koenig has called Starfleet Academy an embarrassment to the Star Trek name, and has suggested that everyone involved in making the show should be ashamed of what they produced. Koenig allegedly said, "Star Trek meant something. It represented hope, optimism, intelligence, and the belief that humanity could overcome its worst impulses and create a better future. Starfleet Academy represented none of those things. It was cynical, preachy, poorly written, and boring. It took the Star Trek name and attached it to content that would have failed on its own merits, hoping that the franchise's reputation would carry it. That's dishonest, and it's destructive to everything we built." Koenig reportedly also addressed the woke controversy directly, saying something like, "People keep saying Starfleet Academy failed because it was too woke. That's not quite right. It failed because it was bad television that happened to use progressive politics as a shield against criticism. When people didn't like it, the creators and cast accused them of bigotry instead of examining whether the show had genuine quality problems. That's intellectually dishonest, and it poisons the discourse around representation in media." This distinction that Koenig is making, that the problem wasn't progressive politics, but bad storytelling hiding behind progressive politics, is crucial and echoes what many thoughtful critics have been saying. The issue isn't diversity or social commentary, it's the specific way Starfleet Academy implemented those things at the expense of narrative coherence and character development. Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura in the original series and broke barriers as one of the first Black women in a non-stereotypical role on American television, passed away in 2022, so she couldn't comment on Starfleet Academy directly. But her family and representatives have reportedly made statements that they believe Nichelle would have been disappointed in the show. According to a statement from someone authorized to speak on behalf of Nichelle's estate, Nichelle was proud of the barriers Star Trek broke in the 1960s, but she was always clear that representation needed to be paired with quality. She wouldn't have wanted Star Trek to become a vehicle for lectures or political messaging that alienated audiences. She believed Star Trek should unite people and inspire them, and Starfleet Academy did neither. The statement reportedly continued, "Nichelle faced real racism and real barriers in her career. She fought for her role and for the dignity of her character when it would have been easier to accept stereotypical parts. For her sacrifices and the barriers she broke to be compared to a show like Starfleet Academy, which had no such barriers to overcome but still failed, would have been insulting to her legacy." This is a powerful statement because Nichelle Nichols represents the best of what Star Trek diversity achieved. She was groundbreaking not just because she was a Black woman in a prominent role, but because that role was written with dignity and substance. The contrast with Starfleet Academy, where diversity seemed performative rather than substantive, is stark. Even actors from the original series films who weren't part of the main cast have weighed in. Several have given interviews discussing how Starfleet Academy's failure affects the entire Star Trek family, and how disappointing it is to watch the franchise struggle when it has such a strong foundation to build from. One actor who appeared in multiple original series films reportedly said, "We spent decades building Star Trek into something meaningful. We did movies that explored aging, mortality, sacrifice, redemption, deep human themes wrapped in science fiction adventure. And now we're watching the franchise produce content like Starfleet Academy that seems to think surface-level diversity and political messaging are substitutes for thoughtful storytelling. It's heartbreaking." The collective reaction from the original series cast represents a complete rejection of the creative philosophy behind Starfleet Academy. They're saying, with the authority of people who built Star Trek from nothing, that the show failed because it misunderstood what Star Trek is supposed to be and what makes the franchise work. The contrast they're drawing is between the original series approach, diverse casting integrated into well-written stories about universal themes, and Starfleet Academy's approach, diversity as the primary focus with story as an afterthought. The original series used science fiction to explore social issues through allegory and metaphor. Starfleet Academy used Star Trek as a setting for direct political commentary. The original series earned its reputation as groundbreaking by taking risks at a time when there were real consequences for showing racial integration and progressive ideas. Starfleet Academy operated in an environment where diversity and progressive politics are celebrated by studios and face no institutional resistance, yet still managed to fail because it prioritized messaging over quality. The OG cast is also implicitly criticizing the current Star Trek leadership for not understanding the lessons of the original series. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek's creator, made a show that was progressive for its time, but that prioritized entertaining audiences and making them think. The people running Star Trek now seem to prioritize political messaging and assume that audiences will watch regardless of quality. The reaction from Star Trek fans to the OG cast's statements has been overwhelmingly positive. Fans who have been critical of Starfleet Academy and modern Star Trek feel validated that the people who created the franchise agree with their concerns. Social media is filled with posts thanking Shatner, Takei, Koenig, and others for speaking out and defending Star Trek's legacy. Even fans who initially supported Starfleet Academy or who generally like newer Star Trek shows are struggling to argue against the OG cast's criticism. These aren't random YouTubers or internet trolls making complaints. These are Star Trek legends with decades of experience and credibility. Dismissing their concerns as bigotry or resistance to change is impossible when they're the people who made Star Trek revolutionary in the first place. The impact on Paramount has been significant. Having the original series cast publicly criticize Starfleet Academy adds to the growing pile of evidence that the show was a disaster and that current Star Trek leadership is failing. It's one thing when anonymous fans complain online. It's another thing entirely when Captain Kirk, Sulu, and Chekhov are saying the same things. Paramount executives are reportedly frustrated with the OG cast's public comments, feeling that they're making an already difficult situation worse. But there's nothing Paramount can do about it. They can't silence the original series actors, they can't dismiss their criticism as uninformed, and they can't argue that people who created Star Trek don't understand what Star Trek should be. The OG cast's reactions have also made it harder for Starfleet Academy's defenders to claim that criticism of the show is rooted in bigotry or resistance to diversity. When George Takei, who has spent decades advocating for LGBTQ rights and representation, says the show failed in its approach to diversity, that argument falls apart. When the multiracial cast of the original series collectively says Starfleet Academy did representation wrong, it's hard to claim that critics just don't want to see diverse characters. The broader message from the OG cast seems to be that Star Trek needs to return to its roots, not in terms of 1960s production values or storytelling styles, but in terms of fundamental philosophy. Star Trek should be optimistic, should use science fiction to explore ideas, should bring people together rather than divide them, and should prioritize quality storytelling over political messaging. William Shatner has apparently been the most active in trying to influence Star Trek's future direction. According to sources, he's had conversations with Paramount executives about the franchise's problems and has offered his perspective on what needs to change. Shatner is reportedly frustrated that his advice hasn't been heeded and that Paramount keeps making the same mistakes. Shatner allegedly told executives, "You have almost 60 years of Star Trek history to learn from. You have examples of what works and what doesn't. The original series worked, The Next Generation worked, Deep Space Nine worked. These shows succeeded because they respected the audience's intelligence and told compelling stories. Learn from that success instead of trying to reinvent Star Trek as something it was never meant to be." George Takei has reportedly been more diplomatic in his approach, but has made similar points in interviews and public statements. He's emphasized that Star Trek's progressive values are important and should be maintained, but that those values need to be expressed through quality storytelling, rather than through lectures or heavy-handed messaging. Walter Koenig has apparently been the most pessimistic about Star Trek's future. According to people close to him, Koenig believes the damage to the franchise might be irreparable, that too many bad decisions have been made, and that Paramount leadership doesn't understand or care about what made Star Trek special. He's said privately that he's glad Leonard Nimoy, Spock, and DeForest Kelley, Dr. McCoy, didn't live to see what's happened to the franchise they helped build. The emotional weight of the OG cast's reactions cannot be overstated. These are people in their 80s and 90s watching something they created and nurtured for decades being destroyed by people who don't seem to understand or respect what they built. That's genuinely painful, and it comes through in their comments. The original series cast has also expressed concern about their own legacies being tarnished by association with modern Star Trek's failures. They worry that when people think about Star Trek in the future, they'll associate it with disasters like Starfleet Academy, rather than with the groundbreaking original series that changed television. That concern about legacy is driving some of their public criticism. They want to make clear that what's being done now doesn't represent what they created. The comparison between the original series' cultural impact and Starfleet Academy's failure is stark. The original series inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. It influenced real-world technology development. It changed how people thought about diversity and representation in media. It became a cultural touchstone that transcended its status as a television show. Starfleet Academy inspired nothing. It generated controversy and division, got canceled after one season, and will be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when franchise stewardship prioritizes politics over storytelling. The contrast between those legacies is painful for the OG cast to witness. The original series cast has also implicitly criticized the current generation of Star Trek actors for not standing up for quality or pushing back against poor creative decisions. The OG cast fought with Gene Roddenberry and network executives over scripts, character development, and the show's direction. They saw themselves as stewards of something important and weren't afraid to challenge decisions they thought were wrong. The Starfleet Academy cast, by contrast, seemed to simply execute whatever they were told to do and then blamed fans and bigotry when the show failed. That lack of ownership or responsibility for the final product has disappointed the OG cast, who believe that actors have an obligation to fight for quality and to take pride in their work. The generational divide is also evident in how the two groups handle criticism. The original series cast developed thick skin from decades in the entertainment industry and from dealing with genuine barriers and discrimination. They learned to separate legitimate criticism from personal attacks and to use criticism to improve their work. The Starfleet Academy cast appears much more fragile and defensive, interpreting any criticism as a personal attack and retreating into accusations of bigotry rather than examining whether the criticism has merit. The OG cast finds this frustrating because it prevents learning and growth. The ultimate message from the original series cast seems to be, "We created something beautiful and meaningful, and you're destroying it through incompetence and arrogance. Stop, learn from what worked in the past, and fix the problems before there's nothing left to save." That message is being delivered with love for Star Trek, but also with anger and disappointment at how the franchise is being mishandled. The OG cast isn't criticizing from a place of wanting to tear Star Trek down, they're criticizing because they desperately want to save it before it's too late. Whether Paramount will listen to the original series cast or will continue down their current path remains to be seen. The OG cast has done everything they can to sound the alarm and provide guidance based on 6 decades of experience. If Paramount ignores them and Star Trek continues to decline, the responsibility will be entirely on current leadership. The reaction of Star Trek's OG cast to the massive flop of Starfleet Academy is ultimately a tragedy. These legendary actors watching the franchise they built being destroyed, speaking out with all the authority and credibility in the world, and being ignored by people who think they know better. That's heartbreaking. But it's also a final warning. If Star Trek doesn't return to the fundamentals that the original series established, if it doesn't learn from Starfleet Academy's failure, then the franchise that boldly went where no one had gone before will boldly go straight into oblivion.